Today we're going to be talking about some different constraints inside of 3ds Max and how we can use them to control other objects. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to take a look at is where to find constraints. One of the easy places that we can look is under animation at the top. We go to animation and we can go to constraints, and we have the different constraints that are available to us. We're going to take a look at a path constraint, position constraint, link constraint, look at constraint, and orientation constraint. So first let's take a look at a path constraint. What a path constraint does is lets one object follow a path and be constrained to it. And we're going to use this circle, this spline or shape, as our path. So I'm going to select my sphere, go to animation, constraint, path constraint, and then I've got a dotted line. And what I want to do is choose my path. Once I do that, my sphere will be constrained to my path, and along my time here, my frame range, if I scrub my timeline, I'll see my sphere following my path. I can adjust that however I want. If I want my sphere to start somewhere else, I can definitely do that. If I want to animate the percent along the path, I can do that as well. So now that we've looked at that, I'm going to undo that path constraint because I'm going to use these shapes for something else. Now let's take a look at, let's see, constraints, a position constraint. Position, I've chosen my sphere. I'm going to now choose my box. And what happens is now my sphere, the position of it, is controlled by the position of the box. Let's undo that and go to the next one. Animation constraint, link constraint. Now we have the same kind of thing that happens here, because now the box will still control this sphere in position, rotation, and scale. Whereas before, when we had just the position constraint, then my sphere went to the same position as my box, but the rotation and scale wouldn't be controlled by the box. So let's undo that. Let's make sure. Okay. Next, animation constraint, look at constraint. And this one's really fun. And we can use this a lot when we're doing rigs, especially with eyes and heads and whatnot. What this does is it allows our object to always be looking at the position of whatever it's linked to. So if I were to move this box now that it's constrained, now that I have, well, since I have wires on there, wireframe, we'll see that my sphere is always looking at my box. And I'll do it another way so that we can see. I'm going to link the box, animation, constraint, look at constraint. And so my box is now looking at my sphere. But if I didn't want my box to rotate like that, what I can do is come to my, under the motion tab, I have what's called keep initial offset. And this says that whatever rotation it was at before, go ahead and keep that. I'm going to click here. We'll see that my box rotates where it was before, and it will still follow. Now there are some restrictions in how this works. So if it goes to a certain point, it will rotate around. So we want to make sure that either we take this into account or we don't rotate so much that our box rotates around. Okay, so we've talked about our look at constraint. So I'm going to undo that. The next thing we have, animation constraint, orientation constraint, which is the same as rotation. So here I can move my box and my sphere won't move. But if I rotate my box, my sphere rotates the same amount. So what I'm going to do is switch this up so that my sphere is controlling my box. So I'm going to break that constraint. I'm going to come in here. I have my orientation constraint under rotation. I'm going to click that and delete it. So now my box is no longer controlling my sphere. But I'm going to go to animation constraint, orientation constraint with my box first selected. I'm going to select my sphere. And this way we can see that when I rotate my sphere, my box also rotates. And I know this is a shorter video, and we can do a lot more with constraints if we combine them with other things, but we've gone over the basic constraints. One other thing that I want to go over is how we can control the weight and whatnot. So if I select an object that has a constraint on there, under my motion list or my motion tab, if I change that weight, then it will act appropriately. So 10%. So now if I rotate my sphere, my box only rotates 10% of what my sphere was rotating. And we do have other controllers that we can assign, but we'll go over that in another video, and they'll react with our constraints differently. So until then, play around with those constraints, see what you can get your objects to do, and have a lot of fun.